All right, let's move into our Patreon version of the podcast. Josh Evans is with me. If you haven't heard our public podcast, go ahead and listen to that first and get a feel for what we're talking about. But Saul is Josh on social media all over the place. I'm fucked up on TikTok. He's also an assistant pastor at Borderland Mission and a cigar aficionado. Not an aficionado.
Yeah. No. Trying to. That's a big word that carries a lot of weight, and I'm trying to know more. But it's I've been smoking for a long time, but I have a tendency to just smoke what I like and not care about why I like it. So.
We were at a really high-end restaurant. We were on vacation a couple of weeks ago, and treating our kids to a really high-end meal that was above McDonald's that they don't get very often, and the restaurant had a sommelier. And a sommelier is somebody who comes around and says, "What are you eating?" and then tries to sell you a $60 glass of wine that pairs up well with it.
Right.
And I'm not a big wine drinker. My wife and my daughter are, and so they really loved it. But yeah, so when you start drinking wine picked by a sommelier, then you're in a whole nother bracket of wine drinking.
Yeah, I've got a friend who is the manager of the cigar lounge that I work at kind of part-time on the side, and he is definitely an aficionado. Like, he can taste a cigar and tell you where the wrapper's from, where the binder's from, where the filler's from, and that's not who I am. Probably never will be that, but yeah.
Wow. I have always known that there were people out there like that, but I didn't know it was quite that detail.
Yeah, I don't have that refined of a palate for sure.
I usually have a cigar. I think my wife used to say, you can have one like once a year out on the golf course, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm a little more than that.
Yeah, I love the smell. I love the experience. You're inspiring me. I may have to go get one here soon. But.
Yeah, one of the things I love about them is it makes people slow the fuck down, sit down, and just either, if they're by themselves, you just kind of have time to reflect. You can't usually do it indoors unless you're at a lounge or something. So you find an outdoor space and you get to just kind of commune with nature, where God is found, I believe, in a lot of ways, more so than the church a lot of times. And it just makes you slow down, and you either think and you reflect, or you have a really good conversation with somebody. So nice.
Well, I just love the smell. the aroma, I should say. Yeah. The aroma.
My wife does not.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay. Neither does mine.
No, she hates it, yeah.
Well, Josh is here, and as I mentioned, he's an assistant pastor, maybe from a little different cut than some assistant pastors. As you heard in the earlier podcast, he's the host of the I'm Fucked Up podcast, and you were talking about how this kind of played out of your own life and your own experience. But we sort of ended the other podcast with you talking about how maybe what changed things was you started seeing you putting this onto your children.
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot about religious trauma of sort of evangelical upbringing of children. What did that look like for you as you started to say, hey, I may be doing something a little bit not good with my children out of this?
Right. So for me, it wasn't, because I was already pretty well on my way, if not completely out of evangelicalism and fundamentalism. When I came to that realization, it was just seeing the bad habits or nature that was in myself reflected in my kids, seeing myself reflected in my kids. Really, it was kind of anything. If I saw myself reflected in my kids, there was something that would immediately kind of rise up in me and try to push them in a different direction. And it's such a silly thing, because it's almost impossible to not have your kids be some sort of reflection of who you are.
Yeah.
Like I have so much frustration with my parents, but I am a deep reflection of who they are on so many levels. And I'm thankful for that. Like I really am. Like there's a lot of things about them, as frustrated as I am with them at any given moment. There are so many good characteristics in them that I now, since I've started walking in a place of healing and don't just see myself as a worthless piece of shit anymore. Most days I am able to see the benefit that I actually got from who they were. And so for my kids, it was just, I would see something in them and I would become very, very angry. And I wasn't physically abusive and potentially not even verbally abusive, but the turning point happened about a year before I really became aware of what the problem was. The turning point was when I came home from work, which I owned a screen print shop and a skate shop. And I was pastoring at the time still. And I came home from work, and my son was like 9 years old. He had really gotten into skateboarding, which he still does today, even more so than then. And I had just bought him for Christmas, which was about a month away. So this was in November. I had just bought him a really expensive setup for a skateboard, more expensive than he deserved as a 9-year-old. But I owned a skateboard shop, so I could get everything at cost. But even at my cost, I was looking at like $200 as part of his Christmas. And I was like, man, I shouldn't do this, but this is going to be a good rig for him. So I'm going to set it up, had it all ready for him. It was already wrapped in the closet. And I came home from work, and his skateboard that he currently had was sitting outside on the front porch. And I had told him so many times not to leave that outside. And we had a lot of other things going on that was causing me to have a lot of internal frustration and stress. I owned my business, which was struggling. I was pastoring a church that, didn't pay any bills. I had to dig out of my own pocket to pay its bills at times. And I came home and I see this, and my instant thought is, damn it. Damn it. Like, he doesn't
deserve that skateboard. Yeah.
I just dropped over $200 on this rig for him. Like, he can't do this. So I went in and I just started yelling, and I was just mad. And I didn't tell him he was worthless. I didn't tell him he was stupid, but what other fucking conclusion is that kid going to come to when I come in the door yelling at him about how he shouldn't do this and he shouldn't do that and blah, blah, blah. And there was no love there. And anytime, and I was doing this on the regular at that point. We had 2 kids that were living with us that we were paying for that weren't ours. They weren't through the foster system because they were one of my wife's sister's kids, and she was in jail, and all this crazy story behind all that. So we weren't getting any help for these extra 2 kids living in my house. So I was financially struggling and stressed, and I just lost it. And I ended up going on a rant for 2 hours. If I wasn't yelling at him because I'd sent him to his room before I wanted to go yell at him some more, I was yelling at someone else that crossed me. And the whole time it's happening, I just feel like I'm stepping back from myself going, what the fuck are you doing? Stop. And I just couldn't come down from the rage. And I don't even know how I got off on this, but
It's good. Just keep going with it.
Yeah. I went to my wife and I was like, listen, I got to do something. I don't know what to do. And I truly didn't know what to do. I was at my wit's end. I didn't know what to do. I didn't trust therapy because I didn't trust paying somebody to talk to them. Let me just say off right now, that's stupid. Therapists are great. I know a lot of people in my family, close friends who see therapists, and it's been tremendous for them. But in my mind, I was like, I'm going to pay someone to listen to me, and that's going to help. So I couldn't do that at the moment in that moment in my life. And I didn't trust drugs because of all the side effects and things I'd heard. So I was like, well, I was living in the Midwest where marijuana was not legal, but I had a close friend who was smoking it, and he's like, man, you need to start smoking some. And I was like, I don't know. I was always very against it. And I went to my wife and I was like, I don't know what to do. And she's actually the one who brought me down that evening. And she's like, yeah, this isn't okay. And I mean, she's a fucking saint because I had yelled at her for bullshit that evening too. And she's like, yeah, this isn't okay. Like, something has to change. And I was like, I know, I don't know what it is, but you're right. Something has to change. What the fuck do I do? I was like, my buddy Matt says I should start smoking pot. Maybe I'll try that for a little bit. And so I started doing that. And that was the first thing that was kind of secret that I kept from my church, from my close friends. And I started not a lot. Like, I know people who smoke and I know the amount they smoke, and I was smoking very little, very, very little. And it helped tremendously. Like, I got through that year. Like, we had a short little 3-day vacation, and I was able to not blow up at the family, which was a normal thing for me to do. And I would just come home from work. I'd have a little bit and it would kind of clear my head. Well, then a year later, I'd been doing that the whole year, and I was smoked 2 or 3 times a month at most. And it kind of retrained my brain, it felt like, to be like, all right, just slow down. This isn't that big of a deal. Chill the fuck out. And I was randomly in a hot tub with friends in Orlando at a weekend conference for pastors in the organization I was a part of, which was a little punk rock organization, essentially. And one of the people there was a therapist. It was a pastor's wife that I was really close friends with them. And we started talking, and I just kind of, now there's a long story behind all of it that I won't go into, but my first episode of my podcast on I'm Fucked Up talks about this in very vivid detail. But basically, I ended up at the end of that night revealing to them that I was smoking, and I knew they wouldn't be okay with it. I knew they wouldn't. And before I go any further, just so you know, I don't care if people smoke. I actually will occasionally still. She's like, well, why are you smoking? And I was like, I'm smoking because I'm stressed, and I don't know. I don't want to yell at my kids. I don't want to be a fucking asshole anymore to my family. And they're the only ones catching this shit. And so she just kind of challenged me that evening with the idea that I wasn't actually fixing anything, that I was just masking it. And I think that's even fine for some people at times, but for me, it wasn't. And I was just like, okay, yeah, I know you're right. I am. I mean, there is some like relearning in my brain that's happening, but really for the most part, I'm just kind of masking my issue. And so she challenged me to stop smoking because I was stressed. So I didn't smoke for the next 6 months, and I came home from that trip. That was in 2017. And I really started dealing with the shit. And what that looked like was just, like I said earlier in the last part of the podcast, was just talking to people. I would sit down with friends and have long conversations about what I was going through. I revealed to my church leadership that I was smoking weed, or that I had been, and that I was done with it for the time being, but that didn't mean I thought anything was wrong with it or that I was done with it long term. I just was trying to figure this out. And one of the things that happened in that moment, this is really what I was trying to get to. I got to back up because I missed an important part here. When I went to that,
you're side roading from your side road.
Yeah,
Very
I
nice.
I do. When I went, you ought to hear one of my sermons. It's a real shit show. But when I went to that conference, I had decided that I was going to leave my church if things didn't look more like what I thought they would within the next year. And to me, that meant receiving some kind of financial compensation for all the effort and work I was putting, because I didn't think it was appreciated. I didn't think anybody gave a damn. So I was like, the very least they can do is pull together and pay for my fucking rent each month. Like, they can at least do that. And these are people, I had people in my church that would not go to a church. They wouldn't go to church. They were just coming to our church because we were something different. And here in the back of my brain, I'm like, no, they need to pay for me to live. And so that was where I was at. And so I come back and I'm talking to my leadership, and I'm telling them about, the fact that I'm smoking pot and I'm dealing with all this. And I dropped that on them too. I'm like, yeah, like when I first got there, this is what I was thinking. And I realized how wrong that is. And I'm looking for affirmation and accolades, and I'm looking for some kind of gratitude because I don't feel like I get it. And that's selfish of me, and I'm sorry. And that's not what a pastor should be doing. And one of the leaders spoke up to me. He's like, hold on. He's like, you need to know. He's like, I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for the conversations with you, the leadership that you put in my life, the things that you've said to me. Like, I wouldn't even be who I am today if it wasn't for you. He's like, you just need to know that I do appreciate you, and probably others do. And while he was talking, in the back of my mind, I'm going, you're full of shit. Like, you're just saying this right now because you see I'm in a vulnerable spot, and you're trying to make me feel, you're trying to make me feel better. And I caught it because of the conversations I just had at that hot tub in Orlando. I caught it, and I was like, oh shit, that's what I'm doing. Right. I will completely pass off this affirmation and this love that this friend is showing me because I don't believe it, because I can't accept it. That's what I've been doing all along. And then all of a sudden, all these memories of people like saying, oh, wow, what a great, like, I really appreciate what we're doing here at Solace. Solace was the name of my church in Missouri.
Oh, gotcha.
And, like, all these memories. And I stopped him. I was like, dude, stop. I appreciate it, but you got to hear what's happening right now in my brain. And I was like, I'm in my brain, I'm saying you're full of shit. And this is what was happening. Like, I was so convinced deep down at a very deep level that I was worthless, that I could never accept the affirmation that I desired so much. And because of that, I just reflected in a very ugly way to the people in my closest circle who love me the most, my family. And I really have no idea how the hell I got off on this tangent.
It's a beautiful story.
I know it was in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. I think what you're doing in the podcast, and it's the I'm Fucked Up podcast. You can get it through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, through the website, all that stuff. I'm assuming you're all over the place, right?
We are, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very similar story where one day I was just going off on my son for something really stupid, and I won't go into the story deeply, but I know that in years to come, I'm going to hear this story back. But I remember thinking, like, I almost was like standing outside of myself, seeing what I was doing, going, "What are you doing?" And not being able to stop it, and thinking that made me a terrible person.
Yep.
And for me, therapy.
Yeah.
And I'm a big advocate of therapy. In fact, I just went to mine today, as a matter of fact.
Good.
Learned not to absolve myself of all responsibility, but to start to understand where that was coming from in me, and that I'm not the only person in the world who struggles with that anger issue. And there is a reason that I have that anger issue. And if I deal with the process of the underlying cause of that, I'm not going to lose my shit on my kids anymore.
Right.
And so that's what I think is so valuable about the stories you're bringing.
Yeah. We're so convinced that keeping things quiet is so necessary because
we're the only ones, you know?
Yep.
Nobody is this horrible.
Yeah. And then we don't realize how much damage, because of those secret inner parts of ourselves that we won't show to anybody else. We're completely oblivious to the fact that that's the thing that's harming the people we love the most.
Yeah. And just to be very transparent, and I'm kind of going through this with my family right now, but, it would be very helpful to me to be able to sit with my parents and say, "Hey, I love you, but I need you, I need you to hear this." Yeah. And they are absolutely 100% incapable of hearing it.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's because that need to protect that part of yourself becomes so ingrained at some point in your life.
Yeah.
That you can't turn from it. So if you're hearing this and you're starting to say, "Oh, I can relate to this story," or "I've listened to one of Josh's and Alex's I'm Fucked Up podcast and I can relate to the stories," no, it's okay. And it's time to lean into the pain and the process of that. Yeah. So you don't find yourself at 80 unable, or 70 unable to have decent relationships with people.
Yeah. It was a hard year. That first year
it's brutal.
Oh, it was painful. Like, and then anything that would come along that would reaffirm how shitty I thought I was, that I could use to reaffirm that idea in myself. Oh, I fucked this up. That's why this family is leaving my church. I fucked this up. That's why this is happening in my life. Those things would reaffirm that negative viewpoint that I had of myself. And I would just tailspin so quick and so hard. And it was such a trudge to walk through that and to walk out of that. But it was literally 7 months later, we went on a 2-week vacation with the family, road trip, which, if you're an angry person at all ever in your life, a road trip is the worst fucking.
That'll bring it out.
So we did 5,000 miles in 2 weeks, and we got back, and it was such a good trip. Like, we camped Yellowstone, California, Grand Canyon. We did all this amazing stuff on the cheap, and we get back, and it's like a month later, and I get this text from my wife, and she just said, she's like, "Hey, I hadn't thought about telling you before today," but she said, and anytime I thought about it, like, I just hadn't had a chance, but she's like, "I want to text you while I was thinking about it." She's like, "I just want to thank you." This kind of fucks me up a little bit. She said, "I just want to thank you for that vacation because you were different." She said, "You were something that you've never been before. You were more patient and understanding. You didn't lose your shit at everybody for anything. And that it was like, oh, so it is fucking working. And she's wrong. I did lose my shit a few times on that trip, but I think she just realized compared to the scope of the trip, it was pretty minimal. So it was just like, oh, fuck, it's working. So the other side of that is when people you love are going through this shit, like they need to know. They need to know that you're seeing change. You're seeing real revolution happening in who they are as a person.
And my wife is so good at that. So she's gotten so good at that. She's recognized. And part of the reason that she's gotten good at it is I've been able to tell her I need that.
Yeah. I did too. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're not allowed to be needy. We're not allowed to have needs. And suddenly you learn we had a fight one. My wife's going to kill me for telling this story, but we had the fight of our lives, probably 20 years into our marriage. We're coming up on our 27th wedding anniversary. And it took us about 20 years to get to this place where we were screaming at each other at the top of our lungs.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember the content of it. I just remember at some point I was like, I need this. And you don't give a shit, as loud as I could yell it. And that was to really hurt her. I was really going to cut her deep with that one. And she stopped and all of a sudden said, I totally give a shit. I wish you knew how much I gave a shit. And that was a light bulb moment, Josh. That was
for sure.
And as a part of the rest of the process that I've been working on, I'm saying, oh my God, there's somebody that cares about my needs.
Yep.
But she did. But she can't meet my needs unless I tell her what they are.
Yeah.
I can't just assume she can guess.
Yeah.
So once you start to learn that you have needs and you get to have needs and it's important to express those, life starts to change, man. And the story you just told is wonderful, and allowing yourself to get emotional about it is beautiful because it is really hard work. Yeah, and it's terrorizingly, traumatically hard work.
Yeah, for sure.
But the story you just told, Josh, is why we do it, why it's worth it, why it means everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I didn't allow myself to get emotional. It was uncontrollable. I wouldn't allow myself to do that.
Well, sometimes I get really good at steering away from that emotion.
I try really hard not to, because I am an emotional person. If you're an angry person, you've got the other side too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's been a part of this process at times when I have had so raw emotion that I like cry at McDonald's commercials. It's like, oh, look at that family eating those fries. It's so beautiful. But another thing I love about your story is a big part of what was passed to you by your parents, not because they're terrible people, but because they were human and doing the best with the tools they had. Yep. You're cutting that off generationally, at least some of it. You're not passing all of it to your kids.
No, that's a conversation I've had a lot of times with myself and with other people, is that, I grew up in charismatic churches and independent Pentecostal churches, and there was always this talk of generational curses. And to me, it was always this pseudo spiritual thing, like, oh, you got to pray it away and break it. And as soon as this happened and I realized, oh, I get to start working on stopping my kids from having this exact, like, they're still going to be fucked up. They're still going to have problems. A lot of them are still going to come from me. But because I was able to at least come to this understanding at some point, I'm able to start stopping this generational curse, because it didn't start with my parents. Yeah. It started with my grandparents. And I know that if you listen to my first episode, you'll hear some of that in that, but it goes back. I've heard stories now, because I did talk to my parents about the story, most of it. They still don't know I've smoked weed, and will do occasionally because that would terrify the hell out of them. But in talking to them, they started sharing stories about the life that my grandfather had with his dad, and why it was so damaging to him. And then my mom calls me one night, and I'm only saying this because I know sure as hell she's not going to go into your Patreon, but okay. She called me one night and she said, your dad is the exact same way. And it was the most transparent moment I've ever had with my mom. She's like, your dad is the exact same way. He thinks he's worthless. He doesn't think he has any value. And I was like, well, fuck, no wonder no wonder that's what I think. And that no wonder that's what I'm seeing in my kids. Like, I'm not trying to teach them that they're worthless, but they're seeing me believe this about myself, and they're seeing the actions that I take, and they're seeing the part of me that few other people see. And it's just rubbing off little by little. They're starting to think, oh, well, if dad's worthless, I probably am too. And that was the generational curse. And I was like, that's what that fucking means. I don't know where that came from. At this moment, I'm not even sure if that's Bible or what, but that's what a fucking generational curse is. It's passing that shit down to your kids and not stopping it. Not like, and now, like, the other thing that I do is I have real honest conversations with my family, with my wife and my kids. And like, still very imperfect, still very fucked up, still very much going through the process. And I'll have a night or a day where I'm just like not in a good space, and I'll lose my shit at some moment. And I will literally be in a tear, just pissed off at whatever bullshit's going on. And I'll be yelling because I'm still so mad. I'll be like, all right, listen, I know this is wrong. I know I'm wrong right now. I know that I'm going to have to apologize for all of this in a little bit. Just please give me some space. Let me walk outside. Don't say anything else. Don't try to defend anything. Just walk away. I promise I will come back and fix this. Please just give me a few moments. And because I've had all these, they know everything I just told you. My wife and kids know everything. And because I've had those honest conversations with them, now when I do that, they're like, okay. Yeah. Like, they're not happy with it either. They're not happy with my behavior at that moment any more than I am, but they get it. They get that I'm trying, and they get that I'm just like, okay, give me a few minutes to come down. Give me a few minutes to repair this, and I will. And thankfully, they're just patient enough to walk through the process with me. So
yeah, that's the honesty. That's the honesty to be able to say, hey, I know I'm not at my best right now, so I just want to tell you I'm not, and you can adjust your behavior accordingly.
Right.
And I think it just gives freedom to people around us. I love the thing about generational curses that you just said, because I think we just spiritualize everything in the Bible.
We do.
And maybe that story of Noah and Ham. Like, Ham isn't screwed up because Noah put a curse on him. He's screwed up because he saw his dad naked doing something fucked up.
Yeah.
and it left an imprint on his life.
Yeah. And how much other bullshit did he see before that? Yeah.
Yeah. And we can fix those things. Well, not fix them. They're always going to leave a mark.
We can start the process.
Let's start the process.
Yeah.
And actually, the marks that are left behind, I think, actually are what make us human. Mm-hmm. And unique and beautiful, and able to say to others, you see this scar here, whatever it is, that's my story.
Yeah.
And when I share it with you, it takes some of the power off of whatever's, coming at you in your story. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff, man. I love it. And I think Jesus lost his shit. I think when he was hitting people with ropes, he was having some sort of episode. And I know that's tough for people, but and when he's out there praying all night, I think it was because he was having a rough day.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's okay.
Knew what was coming. Yeah. It's going to be a rough night too.
Wow. I appreciate what you do, Josh. Assistant pastor at Borderland Mission. Tell us about the podcast. Where do people find it and all of that good stuff? Yeah.
So it's called I'm Fucked Up. In the title, we used a little asterisk as the U, because I wasn't sure. I never actually posted a podcast before. I just talked about it forever. So I was afraid iTunes might pull me down if it was I'm Fucked Up. So, but we're on iTunes and Spotify. It's also, I found out recently, I didn't even know, it's on Audible as well, and probably other places I don't know. But
isn't that funny? I had somebody tell me they got me through some app, and I'm like, I never applied for that app.
Right,
so they get out there somehow.
I think it's the hosting service. I think they're going out to all different places, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's good. But we have a website. It's imfuckedup.net. And it basically just takes you to the one page in our church's website. And we have the Apple and the Spotify link in that page, as well as links to my co-host Alex's music and both of our Instagrams. So
very cool. And in prep for this show and looking up your stuff, there are a lot of fucked up podcasts out there. Just so you
Oh, are there with the U? Yeah.
There was fucked up stories and all those kind of things. So, but I understand your trepidation with Apple for sure.
Yeah, I should have checked that first. Actually, that's a good point. I'm a whole lot of like, just do something, think it through. If it makes sense, do it. And then later on, I slowly find this shit out, which would have helped me at the beginning.
Well, hey, I appreciated you guys having me on your podcast. I love
it was great
listening to the episode. And I'd love to just keep walking this journey out with you as we
for sure
see where this Christianity goes here in the 21st century.
Yep. I think what it looked like yesterday isn't going to be around much longer.
See, now we've got to have you back, because that's a whole other topic we got to hit. All of a sudden I look at the clock, I'm like, oh, I got to wrap it up with
all good.
He just drops the bomb right at the end. So we'll have you back to talk about that one, because I am 100% convinced that the church as we see it today will not survive this generational shift that's happening right now.
Don't think it can.
No. Yeah. All right. Say hi to Alex for me, and Josh, we'll see you again. Go check him out, Josh Evans and Alex, with the I'm Fucked Up podcast. It's worth your time to listen to.
Thanks, Paul.